Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Two Norries podcast. I am James Leonard, joined by my co-host Timmy Long.
Hi, everyone.
This morning we have a guest from Northern Ireland. It's our first guest from Northern Ireland, actually. Michael Irwin. And Michael Irwin has got a very, very interesting story. And look, for the people that don't know you, Michael, do you want to tell us a little about who you are and where you're from?
Well, obviously I'm from Belfast in Northern Ireland with an accent. I worked as a publican in London from I was about early 20s up until I was about 30. And then I moved out to South Africa. I lived in Cape Town and I got into the lifestyle of the rock star out there, and I got heavily involved. I became addicted to cocaine. And then after a few years, the money started running out and I was in a bad shape and did a trip to get me out of the crap that I was in. And but it'd been sort of anyway. I did what I did, and got caught coming through Gatwick on the way back. Got a 12-year sentence for drug trafficking, 6 in prison and 6 on license. So when I was inside, I was like, "Woe was me," And then the first sort of couple of weeks was the detox, and then when I went, I was doubled up with this young lad who was a bit like porridge in reverse. I was the newbie and the old boy, but he was the frequent guy and with all the knowledge, And he was a lovely young lad, but I was once I sort of sobered up after the detox, I sort of went, Jesus, what's going on here, And I said, and then I started getting into education. I started mentoring. I started coaching. After a couple, I was sent around a few English jails. I'd done my first 2 years in English prisons. And then I got my transfer home because family was obviously here and I didn't get many visits in England. So after 2 years, I came home and went to McGarbury for a month or two and then to McGilligan. And we're seen out my sentence. And I spent the rest of that time getting a degree and recording everything that was going on. I got out, did a master's straight after I got out. And then been involved with criminal justice things and torturing people, basically, for a while. And then I got my book published there a couple of years ago, and which was a recording, like a diary of everything that happened from way back in 2007, So I got that published, and it's been a great help to people. So, and I've just recently, last year or so, became a board member of a turnaround project in Belfast, which helps young people coming out of Hyde Bank, which is the younger prison, So we're hoping to expand that into the two main prisons.
So you've
not much.
That's like a 3-minute overview of your whole story. But if I want to bring you back to your childhood. Like, what was it like growing?
Way back.
what was it like growing up in Belfast? Had you a mother and father in the home, siblings?
Well, I mean, that's very, very interesting. After listening to Gabor Mate again last week, which again, what a result, an amazing guy. My story. I grew up in a loyalist Protestant background. My father was in the RUC, so I grew up through the Troubles. Being a policeman's son wasn't the best predicament to be in whenever you're growing up, because nobody liked you. It was, you got it, but I sort of lived under a constant. But like many of us in those days, not just me, we grew up under a constant threat of death. Going to school, checking my dad's car for bombs before I went. It was just answering the door in a certain way. You would never stand in front of the door. You'd always stand by the side and planning your getaways, all that sort of stuff. School-wise, I used to do my English teacher's head in because I was always very good at English but never did anything. So she was always pushing me. And I loved English and loved reading, but I was by the time fifth and sixth form came around, I was too interested in football and women and beer, so it was, I never dabbled with drugs when I was younger. We could only get really blow. At our time, it was only resin, which was okay. And it was always something for the weekend. You know, it was never. So, and then when I was old enough to get out of here, I got out of here and moved to London. Then, you know, so.
Do you know when you were a child? There's an awful echo there. Maybe if you mute when I speak.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's way better. But you know, when you were a child, Michael, and you were the father of a police officer, and around that time there would be car bombs and executions and murders and everything. Like, did you always have a sense of you were a target, you know, or was there always a heightened sense of anxiety in the family, or was it something that was just a part of normal life?
Yeah, well, I think that there's a word for it now, isn't it? Hyper visual or hyper
Hypervigilant.
Yeah.
hypervigilant. That's it. Yeah, I only stumbled across this a couple of years because somebody had said it after they got out of prison. But yeah, I mean, yeah, everything we did was geared that way, you know. So, you know, with in hindsight, obviously, it was just something we all did. You know, it wasn't just me. It was, um, yeah, it was just, to say, a lot of people just fob it off as part of life. But you know, I obviously know different now through my studies and stuff. You know how much it's affected me in later life. You know, so which is probably where you were going with your question, like. But
Yeah.
yeah, so it's. I mean, there was a group of us. We were very lucky because as we got into our teenage years, uh, we all loved rock music, and our friends were Catholics, so we didn't have any bother. And then when we started drinking in pubs, it was a mixed crowd, and we were all united in a love for music, and we didn't. The shit was left at the door of our local pub, you know, which was lovely, and we're still friends today, all of us, you know, which is an amazing achievement after all these years, like.
Mm-hmm. You know the way you described your childhood there, constantly living in that fear that something bad was going to happen. It just brought me back to my last kind of years in drug addiction and alcoholism. You know, you're like, because your crimes are getting more crazy. You know, you're getting involved in more serious criminality and all these different things. And it was like towards the end of my own addiction, my life was pretty much like that. I was living in constant fear that my life might be taken, you know, because of the amount of different stuff that I would have been involved in. And it just, what it brought up for me was, I was thinking of you as a young child going through something like that, who'd done nothing to nobody, and just having to be that fearful of someone attacking you, you know, because of
I mean, it's
where you lived.
It's a terrible indictment of how it was, you know, and thankfully it's not like that now. But you know, and people like myself can use that experience to the better, you know, to make it better. So I mean, yeah, I mean, I had the usual. My mum and dad got split up whenever I was 7 years of age, you know, and it's that old. I mean, but I was very lucky because my mum and dad didn't believe in one side or the other, you know, so I wasn't brought up that way, if you know what I mean. You know, but I thought I did. I thought I had to be a certain way, but people wouldn't let me do things because they said I was too clever. I wasn't cannon fodder. You know, I asked to join a certain organization once, and they said no chance. And I said, why not? And I says, well, you got to take orders from him. And I says, I'm not going to listen to that prick. So, you know, that career never got off, and I was protected in a way by a lot of people too. You know, so yeah, well, it wasn't easy, but I say in hindsight, I'm not trying to fob it off because it's really important, but it's you know, it's not just me. We all got on with it, and we all grouped together, and with the drink and the drugs, some people were worse than others, but most of my friends have all had some sort of problem at some stage in their lives, you know. And I say for me personally, I love the company because I always felt as if I wanted to be included because I felt excluded because of the way I was brought up, you know, the way I was living, you know, and whenever the drugs, I just wanted the, and the drink, I just wanted the oblivion.
Yeah.
You know, I used to force myself to drink really fast and then run so that it would go straight to my head. You know, and so they would get all, you know, things like that. You know, so. But I mean, I dabbled with a bit of coke and stuff in London, but it was only when I hit South Africa I went, because coke just made me alive, like, you know. And it was,
What was Cape Town like?
yeah. Well, I mean, there's a couple of bits of writing that I've written, and yeah, Cape Town was a goddess who seduces you, but you never see the undercurrent. You know what I mean? It was it's a bit like London, I suppose. Excuse me. When you've got money and things are going good, everything's grand. But whenever things start getting a bit tight and your friends just start falling by the wayside, you know, beautiful, beautiful place, great people. But excuse me, as I say, I started getting involved in some nasty stuff towards the end. So I was lucky that I got out of where I was, you know.
Yeah.
Is it because you ran out of money in Cape Town? You kind of fell into the drug trafficking.
Oh no! Well, it was the money was the reason that I did it. But I mean, for years, I mean, I always had plenty of money, but I was still doing what I was doing long before that final thing, you know. So, but it's sort of, you know, we've discussed it several times yourselves. I went past that point of no return like a few years before. You know, I was driving around Cape Town with a gun between my legs, and you know, I was only white guy allowed into certain areas because I was able to bring stuff out and deal in the white areas, you know. So it was, yeah, and I was trusted. So, well, I thought it was, you know. So it was, but it was a totally false way of living, you know. And I have that double-edged sword of, you know, if I hadn't got caught and stayed there, I'd have been dead,
Yeah.
either by the drugs or somebody would have shot me, you know.
Yeah, definitely. I can definitely relate to that.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah,
lucky.
but it was that, you sort of, sometimes you'll think of things and you just go, Jesus Christ, how the hell did I get out of that?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
You're
It's,
probably lucky. You're probably lucky you didn't get caught in Cape Town because the South African prisons are notorious, aren't they?
my friend's father was a guard at Paulsmore, and we used to bring them drink up at the weekends. But I mean, I used to go in and out of there all the time. And I mean, I mean, I just recently watched Raphael Rose series on prisons, and he did
Very good,
South
actually.
African. Yeah, yeah, brilliant, brilliant. But yeah, but I mean, I can't remember the guy's name now. I wouldn't mention it anyway, but he'd, because it was a long time ago. But he had said, you know, there were several bodies come out each week. You know, just as a matter of fact, sitting over a beer, and I was like, and I says, "What's it really like?" And he says, "It's just hell on earth," you know. And he worked there because they have accommodation on the grounds, you know, so the staff would live in the accommodation, and they aren't much better off than. That's the thing, you know. They're not much better off than what the prisoners are, really, you know. And there's a big connection there. There's not, because, you know, your brother could be inside, and you could be a guard, you know, and it's because the poverty there is so severe between, well, and obviously between black and white, you know. So I remember sitting smoking a crack pipe one night with these gangsters in a shed, a shack in Khayelitsha. And they asked me to give me a rendition, the story of how it was Northern Ireland, Belfast was like with all the shooting and all that. And I sort of explained it the best I could while smoking crystal meths, you know. And the guy, big black guy, just turned around and looked at me and says, "But you're white. You know, what are you fighting for? You're white. You've no reason to fight, you know." And his logic, I was like, "Oh, he's actually making a point here," you know. And it was, so we chatted about it, and it was really, you could really see he was quite taken aback by this, you know.
Yeah.
But
And
for him, sorry, James. For him, it was about the actual color of who you are. You know, he didn't really realize it was more. I don't know. Was it a difference of what? Just hundreds and hundreds of years of different stuff. Really,
That's right.
disagreements.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
and stuff.
I think when you look at it and the knowledge, obviously we've all done our studies now, and you know the history of it. It's poverty. You know, poverty is the driving force behind all of this. You know, and you know, David Scott was talking about it yesterday on that prison break. On, you know, it's not new. It's not. We all know about it. It's been written about for years. But the point is, what do we do about it? What are we going to do? And what you guys are doing and what I'm doing a little bit with the charity and stuff is chipping away. And it's because we see it. We've been there. I haven't walked in your shoes. I haven't done what either of you've done. You haven't done what I've done. But we still have the same sort of ethos of where we're going with it.
Yeah, I think as well you make a good point there around poverty. Poverty is probably the one thing, one of the main things that connects everybody in Northern Ireland, working class people, because a lot of the people involved in the Troubles would be from working class areas, and I think that maybe the English government, the British government don't give two shits about the poor people in Belfast.
Save the politics for another podcast,
but listen, it's the same down here. Do you think Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil give a shit about nationalists in the north? They actually don't. It's like poor. To them, they're disposable. They're not interested in them. And I think that for another podcast, but maybe rethink the whole state altogether. Do you know what I mean?
Well, listen. I mean, I've been lucky because I've been away. And you're not living that day in and day out. So, I went to London. I had to come home for a few years to get my knees fixed, and then I took off again. And, I'd been away like 20 years, with a couple of short visits home during that. So whenever I came home via prison, I seen the change, after the Good Friday Agreement, after the, people, like today we'd go out for a pint and, there'll be tables outside bars and cafes and all that, And I thought, oh, flip me, Belfast got cosmopolitan. You couldn't have done that in my day, And it's, it's one of those things I used to say cheekily earlier. Everybody should be made to leave for a year, And it was only whenever I went to Cape Town and then came home via prison that I seen true poverty. I'm not putting it down.
Yep.
Well, there's the poverty that's here, but I mean, what I seen in Cape Town broke my heart. It was you just had to look away because it actually made because I'm quite a caring fella, and it just made me feel so sad.
Yeah, because poverty is relative. Like, and in Ireland, the poor people compared to poor people in Cape Town would be seen as very affluent.
That's right. Yeah,
you're talking about poverty in Africa. You're talking about no sanitation. No like proper beds to lie on and houses to live in. Shanty towns with diseases and running water, no electricity. That's the type of poverty you're talking about there.
Yeah, and as I say, it's I was able to go into those areas, and still dodgy for me, but I was protected in a way. But part of me's glad that I've seen it. But I mean, I was doing one of my early modules in the Open University studies was this about gated communities, and it was this place in Cape Town which was just being built, and I remember playing golf and then putting the stakes in to measure out the land for the actual gated community that came up, and then I ended up studying it in prison, which was quite a bit of a mind twister, So it's like, oh God, I remember those stakes going in, and now I'm sitting in prison doing a module on it,
Yeah.
So it's quite strange,
Do you want to tell us a little bit about the time leading up to the arrest and the imprisonment? Maybe the last few days in South Africa and how that came about, and what it was like being on a plane with that much drugs. Like we've all seen banged up abroad and stuff like that. Like all this stuff must be going through your head. Or are you so high that you don't really think about getting caught?
It's very strange, James. You're one of the very few people that ask me this whenever I'm on it. So it's I'm not that versed on it. It doesn't come out naturally because at the time I was messed up. I suppose I could go. I had my 40th birthday on the 4th of April 2007, and I was running out of money. I literally only had a couple of £100 left in the bank, and I was but my dad was coming over for a month for my birthday. So he came over and he didn't know. But I says, look, I've got a wee business deal. I was just blowing shit up his arse, And I said, I've got this business deal coming through the houses and blah, 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 waffling. Lying through my teeth, basically, which I'm not very proud of. But anyway, he helped me along, gave me a few quid, and he looked after me for a month. And at the time I was going, shit, should I tell him because he would help me, you know? And my mates were going, you should go home with your dad. You know, the ones that knew I was in a bad place, and there was only a couple of them knew. You should go back home with your father while you got the chance. And I was, you don't care and you don't think. So he was there for a month, and at that time I'd already made the decision after he left. We'd put it off to do the trip. So I knew I was doing it before he came over. And then after he left, I then left at the end of, start of May, it might have been around about this time. It had only a couple of weeks, but I had nothing, I had hardly no petrol left in the car. I was actually borrowing money from the dealers, the guys that I was doing it for food, and I was hardly eating. And any money I did get, I was just using it on coke and hookers. And the morning I left, this is one thing I do remember. The morning of leaving, I was, the grouted tiles on the floor. I was down with, I'd had a couple of girls round, mates or guys round the night before, and they were all chopping coke up. So there was a lot that spilt on the floor. So I was actually down on my hands and knees, scraping in between the grouted tiles, and trying to. And I had like a quarter of a tin of flat beer, I think, with some cigarette ash in it, and that because there was no drink left, and it was like shakes and yips, and then the guy came round and he gave me a couple of brandies, and he gave me a case, and he says, right, you go now, I'll take you to the airport, and off we went. And then I met a mate at the airport, and I didn't know this. He reminded me a couple of years ago. I don't actually remember meeting him at the airport. And he said to me, why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you tell me, And so then I went out to Trinidad. They kept delaying the flights. Things kept happening. I was stuck there for a month. So, and it was, I didn't get as much cocaine out there as I was using. So I was sort of semi in trouble, so I was compensating that with drink, and it was sort of pretty much hell. And I was going through. My dad was having to send me money, because I was lying to him. I told him I was out there doing another business deal with houses and stuff, and which is all lies. And the day before I was due to fly back, my dad had given me money, and I said, right, I'm using this cash, and I still had the bag. I'd picked the bag up ages ago, so I'd had the bag in my possession for like 2 or 3 weeks, and I'd actually got kicked out of 2 hotels and all that, so it was madness, and I actually slept in the streets one night with a bag full of cocaine. But where was I?
Yeah, you were in Trinidad, and you were getting money sent over from your father, and
oh yeah. So this was the morning of I said, right, I'm going to the airport. I'm paying cash for a ticket to what do you call that island? I can't forget. My head's going. It says a long time ago.
Yeah.
But I had to go. It was one of those third world islands. Cuba. That wasn't Cuba. Somewhere like that, because I would have Trinidad, then Venezuela, and then somewhere like that. But I would have ultimately ended up in Miami, and then Miami back to the UK. So at the same time, I got the flight ticket from the dealers. So I'm sitting there with a cash ticket. So the one from the ticket for the dealers was to fly direct to London, and the cash was to go via Miami. So it says, right, me being the greedy, sensible guy, says, right, I'll keep the cash, and I'll get out of this, and I'll get the ticket back to London. So it was that touch and go of whether 50-50 of whether I ended up in jail in America or England, So it was that, and there's no logical thinking about it, So I got on the plane. I was told somebody would contact me on the plane, and then when I got there, I mean, I was hammered when I got off the plane, and they put me over with a bag and said, call over here, size me. Oh shit, this is it. And then stuck a spike in the bag, and they just, I mean, see this business of putting clothes over stuff in a bag and all that. Forget all that nonsense. They don't carefully look through your bag. They just tip my bag out. Excuse me. But anyway, there was this lovely blue shirt there, and they stuck a spike in it, and the powder flew all over all over the back, and I went, hey, you're not tucking your way out of this one, mate, And as they were slapping the cuffs on me, I was sort of leaning on the desk because my legs were a bit wobbly, and I was like, oh, Jesus, obviously. And there was people walking past going, they had loaded the plane.
Yeah.
So I was the fall guy as people were walking past. I sort of recognised a couple of people, and they were sort of going.
And that's an interesting point to bring up, because it's quite common that somebody would be alerted to the authorities that they had drugs on them as a sacrifice to let the other more substantial amounts of passengers through. Do you think that's what happened with you?
Well, yeah, I think don't get me wrong, I still did it. You know what I mean?
I know.
I'm not saying, I got what I deserved and all the rest of it. But when I think I remember, the interviews were just crazy. It was not no comment things, load of nonsense as well, because that cost me 4 years. if I'd have pleaded guilty straight away, I wouldn't have done 4 years. But so it's not like the movies. Yeah. But the customs guy says, "Oh, eventually you've arrived." Took you long enough. They'd been waiting for me, but I said there'd been so many things, cancellations, that I'd been flagged long before that, and I think they were just putting it off until they did get the plane fully loaded.
I suppose,
and because it's an industry, as you know. It's just the war on drugs is that's another podcast, but it was all in hindsight and sobriety that I could see all this.
Do you know what sticks out for me? Do you know the value that these guys at the top have on people's lives? The value that they had on your life, the consequences that would have been there for you. But you know what? I look at your situation, as in my own situation. That was probably, you could look at it any way you want, but for me, it was probably the best day of your life.
You have, that's another thing, Tommy, that I say. I don't believe in God. I never have, never will. But something was looking up. I as I say, when I was doing that, I do tell people this whenever I was down doing that on the tiled floor. I said, maybe I'll get to prison and I'll be able to do a degree. That actually went through my head when I was on hands and knees on the floor. And I say this with the prison did save my life. Well, stopping that life by going to prison saved my life. And then what I did in there helped me with my life, because I turned it on its head. I turned a bad situation into a good decision. Good.
How much did you get caught with, Michael?
1.1. It started off at 2.5 kilos, and it whittled down to 1.1 kilos. And I reckon the sellotape around it put it over the 1 kilo, because they couldn't have done me for drug trafficking if it's over 1 kilo.
Okay.
Under 1.
How did your family react?
Well, my dad, he got the phone call. You should read the book.
Yeah.
my dad got that phone call, the dreaded phone call from the police cell in Brighton, where I was being held, and it was what? This is like 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning. I didn't know what end of me was up, and then everybody can hear your call, and they're all shouting at you and everything. And he turned up 2 weeks later at HMP Lewis and came to visit me. He says, "What the?" I'll not go into the language too much, but you can get the gist. Especially him being a retired police officer, but he was well, it was that part of it. But he was more. Well, he told me in later years he was more worried about what I would have to go through, because he knew what prison was like. He says, we don't send people to prison to have a good time, Michael. And he says, the thought of that hurts me the most. My poor mum and dad have been divorced for a long time. My mum was returned to sender letters until I got home. And then it was because she was so angry, that I could do that to myself. And but once she calmed down, but that's me and my mum. We both were just very volatile like that. We go snap, and then okay, what can I do? And this is what happened with most people. I don't know whether it happened with you guys or not. It happened with most people that are close to me. They ripped me a new asshole and called me all the names under the sun and laid into me, and no quarter given of how much of an idiot and arsehole I was. And then the last sentence is, "What can we do to help?"
Yeah.
So let me give you a piece of my mind. I hate you for what you've done, and I'm not you don't, but can I help you now? So actually, I find that quite
And you know what,
emotional still
Michael?
whenever
They
I
are,
think about
I
it.
can completely relate to what you're saying because they are the genuine people that really care for you, like, and love you. Because I see it with my own family. I see it with my wife when I was destroyed. I see it with family members at the moment. Like, it's all you want from is you could be giving them a hard time, just telling them, finding every fault in their behaviors, but they don't see, they just cannot see that it's you're doing it out of love. Although, like, we've recently learned through the Gabramate podcast last week, he gave a few different examples of what way to be able to deal with a family member in addiction.
I watched it 4 times.
But you know what you're talking, about there, Michael, is just unconditional love. That's what that is. It's like no matter how
Well, this is it.
hurt they can be, how disappointed, you can feel all those things, but yet still rally around the person and still help them in spite of everything.
Well, I can tell you a lovely story. My mum and dad hadn't been seeing each other. They've been mum remarried, 20 odd years, maybe 25 years. And they'd got. I didn't know this, but I would, when I was getting my home leaves, I would have had to stay. I had to stay at my dad's house. So my dad got me a bed, and then my mum got the duvet and the cover. So she came up to meet him and said, "What can we do together to help? I'll get the women's stuff, the duvets and the pillows and all that." So, but I didn't know this now that whenever I was coming home, because I'd seen them obviously on visits for years, but the first time in McGabry, it was my first visit. I'd sent numbers out separately to my dad and my mum, and oh God, I'm gonna get slapped for this. But I remember I got the visit, Irwin visit, so I've got escorted over to the visits hall, and I walked in, and there was the two of them sitting together in the visits, and I mean, boom, lump, all these like feelings, and I mean, I'm just home from England, and this is the first time I've seen my mum, and since I did the trip, because anyway, anyway, it was quite a thousand thoughts, and I sat down and I said, "Flip, if I knew coming to prison would have got used to together, I'd have done it years ago."
I know, yeah.
So I got a quick from my mother. So, but
Do you want to?
but they laughed, and it was lovely, and they chatted, and and it was just one of the nicest things. And then, it's amazing on the visits with things like that. You don't see anything else around you. You do, you're as you say, you've got that hypervigilance. It's there. Your extra eye, if you want to call it. But when you're in that bubble, it's lovely,
Yeah,
So,
and it just shows as well that parents can be separated and divorced, but still they can still be a loving connection there. They share a mutual love in you, and that brings them together, even if they live apart and they have different partners and different lives. There's still that connection, and it's a nice thing to be able to witness.
well, my dad passed away a couple of years ago, and it was obviously difficult, but I was okay with it now. It was okay then, but it was his time, and he was done. But I still used to, whenever something would happen or would have an argument, I think it's all your fault anyway. You made me, So you just you always put the blame back on them, like So.
I know, yeah. But look, rest in peace, to your father. Anyways, he sounds like he was a good man.
Oh yeah, he'd be grand. He's fine. Yeah.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about what it was like in prison? Maybe the early days and how long it took you to settle into it, and how you got into the education side of things.
As I say, well, luckily enough, I recorded it all, so it's easy. And it started off just like sitting here with a jotter and going, "I've just spoke to that dickhead James Leonard. He's done my head in, and Timmy's not too good at it, So you would write something like that then down and progress from that. So it's a bit like that, but it was incremental. The more prisons I've seen, the more wings I've seen, the more I learned of how to handle prison. The more I've seen it as a bureaucratic minefield of uselessness. Basically, they couldn't organise a piss up in a brewery, but with some really good people there who wanted to do good things, and some just nasty outright bastards. I was what started me off on the studies thing was, which again I've told a lot of people, was that I was reading about Phillips and Bardo and the Stanford prison experiment.
Oh, yeah.
With the guards and the prisoners. And I was wondering, here's me, if I was a prison officer, I passed the police exam when I was 18. And they told me to come back in a year, but I went away and never came back. So, that was in my head when I was younger to be something like that. I said, if I was a prison officer, would I be that asshole? Would I let that uniform, would I be that arrogant anyway?
Yeah.
So, you know what I mean? And this officer came to the door and told me I had to go down to the SO's office. But the way he told me and how he told me wasn't very polite. And just as I'm reading about Zimbardo, and I went, what gives that man? That he's only a person, he's younger than me. I was 40 when I went to jail, and I used to run pubs, I used to run dodgy pubs in London, I used to run the Chelsea Headhunters pub. And all pubs had gangsterism, so I was no valet, if you know what I mean. But I'd rip his head off. He spoke to me like that, and any other walk of life. And I said, but still, mate. You know what I mean? So, and I went down there, so I says, what's your man's problem? I said, he's having a bad day. Anyway, we're going to put you on high risk. Because so I had a chat with the SO, and he says, look, we don't want any trouble out of you. You're going to get a long time. You're going to have to start finding your way. So he says, look, but I'll give you a bit of advice. Don't come off high risk, because they'll always try to get you to come off it, no matter, because you'll be moved about the system for a while. So that sort of first early interaction, and through sobriety then, it got me into the studies. So I started, getting into that. And then obviously with the mentoring, I was teaching guys to read and write. And that got me more involved, and I was helping out with things, and we tried to start a prisons advice centre and all these things. But all these things that we were doing then are actually coming to fruition now, or have come to fruition in prisons in the UK and Northern Ireland. But a lot of senior staff have told me, senior officials, that you came just before the wave. So I say I've recently hooked up, but it was the education and juggling and sitting. Sometimes, one prison, I done the passive route, nothing happened. One prison, I done the aggressive route, nothing happened. The third one, I sat back and watched it and went, this is how. Then the fourth one, I applied at that, and things were a little bit better.
What kind of courses were you doing?
Well, I started off just with an openings course, and then you had to do your English and maths and that. But then I was doing the mentoring, and then I was going to education departments. But it was mostly writing. I was mostly writing my book up. That just let me, because it was something to do, because I hadn't been sentenced yet. So it was only when I got home to Northern Ireland that I really got into the studies. It was full time on then. And then I was a server. I was the server orderly. There was only one on our wings, and I was that guy. And but the thing is, I was helping people reading and writing, guys. I was a listener as well, So I had all that going on, and I say the early days, tried one way, it didn't work. Tried the other way, it didn't work, and I think it's all about managing time, and then you start to. I think one of the biggest turning points for me though was, it wasn't just the education. Was I knew it was going down, and I went, you got to stop lying to yourself. You're not Jack the Lad. You just start being truthful to yourself, Michael. So I looked in that little polished bit of steel I have over the sink. And I just looked into it and I said, no more. Just looked into myself, and that's what I done, And sometimes it got me into trouble, because I'm not going to beat about the bush and tell. But what are you going to do? Kill me? What are you going to do? Stick you in jail? That sort of attitude, and try to be respectful of others.
Yeah.
And it was a good thing that always stood by me in life, because the pubs, the pub scenes, there's always a bit of gangsterism going on somewhere, and some serious guys knocking about, and I always found if you were respectful to them, you would get that respect back, and don't cross, So I think in prison, you have to be very streetwise to be in prison, and as I say, sometimes, as I'm sure you both know, you can be the nicest guy in the world and get on with everybody, but sometimes you have to stand up. And I just barked at everybody for a while. So.
You mentioned as well, you mentioned there in passing that you were a listener. Do you want to tell people about what that actually is?
Well, the listeners are prisoners. It was funny. I met. Well, the prisoners are listeners are prisoners trained by the Samaritans to be as Samaritans are on the outside. The way Samaritans would take phone calls, but in prisons you would go to somebody's cell if somebody was of suicide or self harm. So you'd always go in twos. Back in the day, I think you were able to go in ones, but now it's more safe for safety reasons. You go in ones. So, but your door's always open. So I found that because people knew who you were, you'd get a wee rap on the door. Here, Mickey, can I talk to you about such and such? So a lot of guys knew not to actually do a call out because it would go on their record. So if they were having mental problems and psychological problems, this would come on their record whenever they were involved with kids later on, if they were having in a custody battle or something like that. So it was like a double-edged sword. If guys that were really in trouble and needed proper help, but they couldn't go to the authorities because that help would involve it being documented. So we did that, and I said there was a team of us, and one of the guys I met as a listener, I'm actually meeting. He's coming today for a beer after we became best friends, and we still are. So and a few years ago I met John Lonergan, and he was doing the Samaritans annual, Irish Samaritans annual. So I had a nice chat with him, and that podcast was brilliant with him. He's some character.
He is, yeah. And I had a lecturer over in UCC, Cindy O'Shea. She was Samaritans years, but she helped bring the listening program at the Cork prison, actually, where we're from.
Have you just started it?
It's there a few years now, yeah. It's around Irish prisons now as well.
Yeah, it really is a fantastic thing. There's another thing that I did. I might have sent you a link to it ages ago. Was the Prison Smart, which Gabor Mate touched on again, was the breathing and meditation. I did that in the HMP Highdown in 2008, and I was just doing a meditation with this because if you get, I've got PTSD, anxiety, all the IBS, all the lovely stuff that goes with that. And one of the things that helps me is if I get excited or happy, I can have a PTSD attack because everything just goes, yeah.
Can I ask you something?
So the meditation thing I still do today, but I started it in prison. Then you can continue it on the outside, But it's specifically designed for prisons. This course, So
yeah.
Do you know when you were educating yourself inside in the prison, Michael? That was all early on in your recovery and whatever. And were you able to retain information, like reading books and stuff? Because I really, really still struggle with that. Like that was no, I know. Like for people in early recovery or any recovery, like I'm dyslexic as well, and I've never been diagnosed with ADHD or anything like that,
Yeah.
But like when I look at the actual what ADHD is, there's a lot of it's quite similar to me as a person. No, I don't put a label on myself because I haven't been diagnosed with it, but in early recovery, I found, like in the prison systems where I got educated as well, I found it very, very, very difficult to retain any form of information.
It's a lot of it's to do what I found and what I've learned. I mean, it used to happen to me. I would write 4 or 5 lines, and then move on to a paragraph, and then get on to the next paragraph, and I couldn't remember what the first paragraph was, and a lot of it, and then I remember going to do an exam one morning, and a particular member of staff was on, and he was one of those guys that wore the hat right down over the nose, and wore the black gloves and the full uniform with the moustache, and he didn't give you a pat down. He searched every that invasion, and this is like 5 minutes before you're meant to sit down and do an exam for a degree. And because of this fight or flight thing that comes automatically, your body has ways of dealing with that, and the brain's way is shutting down. So your daily life in prison is full of little moments like that, little fight or flight moments. So your body gets conditioned to shutting down, and that's why you can't remember things, because you're still in that shut down mode. You might have think it's past, but it's already there. So, maybe something happened that morning or the day before, it might be still in your head. But as soon as you go down to do a bit of writing or a bit of study, you go, well, what the hell's that all about? So you're still in that space.
Yeah.
So that's what I found, and I found it really amazing that I remember going to do my actual final exam 12 days before I got out, and the governor, who was he didn't like me very much, put it that way, he double booked the room, and we spent the first 15 minutes trying to find a room for me to sit with the teacher, to sit, and that bastard did it on purpose. I'm not afraid to say it, but he did it on purpose, and I know he did. And ironically, the only room we could get was his office, because he'd taken the day off and he didn't have to deal with it.
That came back.
I'd say he was sickened when he found that out.
I'd say,
and I was out a week later, so it didn't matter.
I'd say Michael was wiping the snots underneath his table and all, James. What do you think?
No, it was just the idea of it was like, oh my God, so hilarious. But but as you say, the studying side of it inside is, I found it a lot of guys. Who the fuck does he think he is, walking about with books? He's up himself. And a lot of people purposely tried to take me down. Through adjudications and stuff, because once you get a black mark against your name, that's it. You're that. Yeah. You're labelled that person. So that's. It wasn't easy, and anybody that
our podcast is going to be shown in Irish prisons, and there's going to be prisoners watching this, and you might spark an interest here now in education, and they might say, I'm looking at a few years, how when I use my time. What advice would you give to that person? Yeah. Maybe what colleges were you applying for? What courses can you do? What maybe the process, and maybe just some advice for that person.
Well, the first thing I would say is never give up. The strength that you've taken to get through to where you are now is a testament to the strength that you actually have in itself. So if you're embarking on this education thing, stick with it. Ask for help. Don't be afraid to ask for help when you need it. And just give it your all and be truthful, and if you're having difficulties, speak to people about it, and why you do it. You're not going to change the system, but what you can do is help people in it. People that are coming behind you. And for me, I remember my first, and this is why it's important, and you guys will both know this because you've done it. And for anybody that's following in our footsteps, is, mine was a while ago, but my first meeting with Shad Maruna, and he came to visit me, was, what can I do for you and what can you do for me? And I said, well, I want letters after my name. And he says, why? And I says, because I want to make a difference. And I know that at my age, my time of life, when I get out, I won't be able to get a job. And I have to do something else, but I'll need letters after my name, because you will be recognised as a criminal. So he says, I says, what do you want from me? He says, I want your head, I want your knowledge, I want your experiences, and I want you to be able to share them with me. So and we became good friends. So the why is what that education has done for me has opened doors and allowed me to sit with government, allowed me to sit in rooms with the Department of Justice officials, to meet with people and hold your own. In a constructive way, when you're not just barking at somebody, you're combining your personal experience of prisons and what happened to you with the academic knowledge, and together that's a very powerful tool that people can't shirk away from. They have to listen.
And I'd say, and for people that don't know, Shad Maruna is one of the most, he's a world-renowned criminologist, and he's especially interested in how people desist, stop offending behaviour and reintegrate back into society. And I think for people interested in criminology, social studies, maybe I think that any department, criminology department, sociology department in any university around Ireland would be only too happy to help out a prisoner that was looking to, learn, in terms of access to books and access to courses and stuff like that.
That's the other thing I have to mention is that I'm also part of a group called Convict Criminology, which is a global people like ourselves who went in and came out, and most of them have done PhDs, but also guys that worked as correctional officers or prison officers and stuff, or have experience with criminal justice. And our sort of remit is to do what we're doing, is to help others. I read in Inside Time, which is a UK prison magazine. I read of a guy called Andy Aresti, who'd done a few years inside and became a doctor, and he's doing wonderful things. And I say I'm friends with all these guys now. We went to Italy a few years ago for a conference, and they've been so supportive for me. I haven't worked since I got out of prison, so a lot of things, conferences and stuff. They've got me arranged flights over things like that. So there's that support there, and people need to know about them.
Yep.
And as Jeffrey Ross said to me the first time I met him in England was, I think in prison you think you're the only one. You're the only person in your head, which is the right way to be, because you're the only person you can do is look after yourself. But there's so much support out there. If you use it, it's there for you to grab the bull by the horns and ask people, because they will give you the help, and bend over backwards to help you.
Yeah.
And it's a thing we're starting to see now with giving people that chance. They'll spend the rest of their life trying to prove you right. So
exactly, it's true.
Get stuck in and do it.
Yeah.
The biggest thing was it kills time. We all know this. Why did you start doing something? Because you didn't want to be mopping floors every bloody day, Timmy might have designed a new mop, but that's a different point.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about when you got out of prison and that reintegration process?
Still going on, mate. Still going on. Yeah, things don't turn out the way they don't. There's not enough about it. It's nobody warns you what it's like. I'll not go on about the negatives because there's too many, and we'll sort of have a rough idea.
Okay.
What they are. It's been what I have found about the honesty thing that I go back to. That when I said people respect you for it whenever they find out what you've done. In the early days of me coming out, when I started drinking again, because I hadn't had a drink for a long time, I was worried that would send me back down the slippery slope of the drugs, which it didn't, thankfully, And then I'm not reliant on it, but whenever I was getting a taxi home and driving past Queens, I said, I went there, It says, oh, when was that? And I said, last month or, last year, because I just came out of prison and I went there and did. Oh, really? What did you do in there then? What were you in for? First of all, what were you in for, and then what did you do? What would you do while you're in there? See, when you told them that anybody that you did a degree in prison, you came out and did a master's, you're now working with the people that locked you up. They fucking stick it to the man, give it to the man, get in there. The whole perception changes. There was one day I came back on a home leave, had been taken to something, and they purposely made us late for the train, so we had to wait 2 hours. In those days, the trains were every 2 hours, so we must have been like 5 minutes, and you had to wait 2 hours for the next one. So I said to this other fella, I said, have you any money? There's only two of us. I says, you any money? He says, how much do you want to get a taxi? How much a taxi be? About 60 quid. That's a lot of money, And here's my wife got it. He said, so we went and got a taxi, ordered a taxi across the road. And we got in the car. Where he's going, lads? Going to Belfast, right? But that's going to be 60 quid, blah, blah, blah. Where he's going to? Going to Ulster University. Oh, we're just out of McGilligan. We're going to do talks about education in prison. And you just seen the guy's knuckles go white on the steering wheel. He's just like, he says, fuck me, you're not going to rob me, are you? No, we're going to talk about education. I'm just finishing up a degree and I'm hoping to go to Queen's when I get out. And the other guy had just done some first year, second year English court level or whatever. And he said, that's bloody brilliant, lad. That's magic. And so the conversation immediately changed from you're not going to rob me to... And he said whenever he was dropping us off, he wished us luck. And he says, if I could give you these for free, lads, I would. You know, and that was the kindness. See where that kindness came from just switching that by being truthful and honest and using your time to good use. I say that's what the point that I'm trying to get at. Because the prison does give you that time. But on the way back, with the vans coming to pick us up, this is like 2 days later, and we're in the prison van, and the taxi driver came out and he see me, I was in the front seat, and he see me and he run out in the middle of the road and he's giving it the thumbs up and he's going, nice one, son, nice one. And I told the boys what had happened in the van, and all the other fellow prisoners, and they were all going, nice one, Mickey, nice one. And the only one that wasn't laughing was the prison officer driving the van. And that's a testament to what the job does to people as well.
Yeah.
So
it breaks their spirit, and I think it's soul destroying, isn't it?
Well, all that stuff that you're saying, the advice and the door open. I mean, I recently had a Zoom meeting like this with our Justice Minister, and I've spoken to our previous Justice Minister. But without all that stuff, I would never have had those doors open. So you have to be in it to win it.
Yeah. So look, before we close, Michael, do you want to tell us maybe about like how things are for you today? Maybe some plans for the future, or
well, to be honest, now the health hasn't been good, so I've been on a slippery slope. I'm just moving, and I have to move house. So personal stuff aside, I'd given up a couple of years ago. Well, not given up, but I just got fed up of hearing the same old crap over and over again from politicians and officials. And I was invited up to Hydebank for the Learning Together thing. The Shad had a couple of speakers, and Wayne Hart came up from Dublin, and there was somebody who was meant to come over from England. I says to Shad, "What's your plan B?" And he says, "You are." And I was like, "Oh, right, okay." So anyway, I went and did my bit, but I got talking to the head of the prison service and a few other people, and I was really impressed with what I seen. And I don't mean that prison's not good, prison's horrible, prison's shit.
Yeah.
But the attitude and the thought process and the things that they were saying, they made me my ears prick up and pay a bit of attention, So I was speaking to a guy there, and he asked me to go for a cup of coffee in a week or so. So I then invited me onto the board of this turnaround project, and then COVID hit, obviously. So, right about that time, I think it was one of the first times I'd sort of talked to you, James, as well,
Yeah.
And so things have just been put on hold for a year, and it's been a tough year, I'm sure, I can't even think what it was like for prisoners inside, but I know in Northern Ireland they had a slightly different setup. I don't think that had any cases or anything, and they kept the wings isolated, so guys are still able to get out. They weren't banged up all day like they were in England, So I think they've done something good there, and then let a few people out early as well. As I say, they've got a very progressive mindset there. So I say what I'm doing now with the turnaround project is having Zoom meetings like this. I'm able to use my experience of academia and prisons to influence what's happening with the and it's helping. I did something the other week which is actually hopefully getting somebody a job, and I'm going, yeah, that's all right.
Brilliant.
I can live with that. Yeah, so it's it's been a while coming, and I fell in with the rest of the board, and the people involved are an amazing. I mean, you guys have it down in Cork as well, and you just time, bide your time, and if things don't work out, don't give up. And as I say, I'm not physically able to go and do the job that I would ideally be doing, but I can still add my tuppence worth at the minute, which is worth more than a fiver, So
no, it's brilliant. And look, if there's any way we can collaborate or help out, we'd love to.
Yeah, well, you will be. I say, well, I'll definitely say this is a starter. I know it's been a while coming, but we've a podcast plan. We've all other sorts of stuff. We're trying to do a radio program maybe and things, So
yeah,
definitely. And is this because there's the north-south connection with academics? that's already there. I'm sure you're aware of it, James, being in
Yeah,
the criminology.
we hosted it in Cork a couple of years ago.
Right, so I want to do that with the organisations and stuff, so because we do have a slightly different slant on things than the rest of the UK, if you know what I mean,
Yeah.
as the one island, but two different countries, but as I say, different podcast for a different day. So it's, we'll definitely be hooking up. But it's only just begun, really, so
Exactly.
I say the COVID thing has been great because we've sort of been able to take a breath back in some ways, step back and go, right, okay, what can I do now, So.
Yeah, well, look, we hope to, once we're vaccinated, we hope to travel up north to do maybe a weekend of podcasts with some, and we'd love to meet you and get a cup of coffee and a bit of lunch or something, so we'll definitely do that.
Well, listen, hopefully by that stage we'll be up and running as well, so you can be guests on ours and stuff,
Most definitely, Michael, we'd love to.
Yeah.
And as I say, stick together. This, what you guys say, take the hat off. When I seen James on, I'm sure you've obviously known him a lot better than I do, Timmy. But when I seen James on the Tommy Tiernan show, and anybody that I've met that's seen that, there wasn't a dry eye in the house, mate. And it was just you did something personal there without knowing it.
It took an awful lot of courage, and I think that was the first of many to come after James. Like, it gave people the courage to really start talking about their own stories a little bit more, and I think James kind of helped push people.
Yeah, all I did there really was, like, people have a perception about who's in prison, who's on drugs, who's in homelessness. All I did was put a face and a story, like a context to one individual, and that got people thinking about, I wonder how many other Jameses or how many other people on the streets or in prisons or on drugs are actually genuine, okay people. They've just been through tough times, I think that's all we did, was change, kind of got people thinking a little bit critically about and maybe try and break some stigmas and stuff like that, and challenge some stereotypes. That's all we did, and the podcast now is trying to give other people the platform. When Timmy came on and my wife come on and yourself, and there's loads of people like me out there that good, honest, hard-working people. They've made bad decisions, but there was always a context to it, and just about trying to create a bit of awareness, a bit of education about those contexts.
That was one of the most standout bits of me that really hooked me, was whenever Tommy asked you what had changed, and you said, well, I'll not attempt your accent, but you said, I met a woman, and he was like, aye, that'll do that to you,
yeah, that made sense.
That could go anywhere, though. That could go anywhere, the woman thing. It could go left or right.
But I thought it was brilliant, and to say, I know what that feels like, to not know what you're doing, but you're actually helping people. I sat in a pub a couple of years ago, it's a lovely summer's day outside, everybody's out having a smoke. There's quite a few of us that day, and this woman came up and says, are you Michael Irwin? And I says, aye. She says, can I have a word with you? And I went, shit, what have I done now, And she says, do you remember him? And she pointed over to this guy sort of standing meekly in the corner having a cigarette, Henry vaguely. He says, you helped change his life. That's my husband. You told him he'd knock his bollocks in if you ever seen him back in prison again. and I went, but I couldn't remember the guy's name. And I said, and he told me at the time, I can't remember now. He said, and he gave me a big hug, and he says, thanks for helping me with the reading and writing and stuff. You helped me. And it wasn't just that. And she was crying and gave me a hug. And then I started crying. And then I went over to the table, and my mates, what the fuck's going on? What's that all about? And then they all started crying. And everybody was like, yes, so it was, you don't know the effect that you're having on people unless you put yourself out there. And the only thing I'd say about it is, I was asked already, just be careful, because revisiting all the time can also flip the other way, so always be aware of it and have people near you too, So,
of course, and you have to do it. You have to do it with a good support network, and even people that we bring on the podcast, we try to vet them as best as possible and not too vulnerable, and you have to be in a good place to do something like that, you have to be kind of steady in your recovery, and so
that's what the listening training comes in to, because what they say is you always have a backup, have somebody that you can be the Samaritan to or Samaritan for, be it, always have somebody that you can unload to, because getting it off your chest is the way to help you cope with it, you know.
Yeah. Look, we'll leave it there, Michael. Thanks for your time. It was a pleasure to meet you. You're just a gent, and we look forward to meeting you in person.
Cheers, guys. All the best.
Thanks, Michael.
And I'll speak to Sean about this later.
Thank you, pal.
Do tell him we said hi, and we look forward to talking to him on the podcast too sometime.
All right, all the best, lads.
God bless, Michael.
God bless. Enjoy your pints.
Bye.
Take it easy. Take it